You guys are the panelists now. It's fine with me.
Well, and I appreciate him doing that because last year I authored the Senate Bill 1, the Taxpayer Transparency Act, which passed overwhelmingly and became law after it passed both houses. And I mean, this is probably the easiest question on here. Of course, government owes 100% of transparency. Everything that we do as a legislative body must be open. I talk about letting the sun shine in. If we can't have everything that we do exposed and open to we the people, we shouldn't be doing it, JB. We just shouldn't be doing it, just plain and simple. And so it's important, and I want to give you a real brief story of what happened to me when I served on the Owasso City Council several years ago. We had a contingency of a newly elected city council members from Kazakhstan. I think that's the way you pronounce it. And it was right after the Cold War and the Soviet Union split up, and all the other little countries, where they were over here touring the United States trying to figure out how to set up their government, their local municipalities. And we were sitting around a big conference table, and only one person with them spoke English, and it was their interpreter. And everyone else had a little earphone, and the interpreter had a little microphone. And as we talked, well, he would talk very quietly into his microphone, and it would be interpreted into their headset. And I made a comment, and after I made this comment, I looked around and I saw they started talking to each other, and I recognized that I must have hit a nerve or something. But I made the comment about transparency and openness in government, and how everything that we do at the city council is open for public discussion and public scrutiny. They could not understand that. They had never experienced that before. And so the interpreter stopped me. He said, Ray, could you explain what you meant by this openness in government? And so I explained how our process worked and how our process does not work if everything is not open. And so they left Owasso, Oklahoma with a good dose of transparency in government.
Gary, how much accountability does our government owe to its people?
I was reading the Constitution and trying to get a good answer to it. And in Article 6 of the Constitution, it says, the senators and representatives and the members of the state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers, both of the U.S. and the several states, shall be bound by an oath or affirmation to support the Constitution. And to me, I believe this is the measure of accountability all elected officials should have on every level of government, local, state, and federal, and civil or military, to abide by the rule of law. And if they don't, then we exercise our power from question 1 and boot them out.
Well, accountability is complete because the government's at the bottom of the heap in our structure, so it's complete. And I know that's a general answer. There's some secrets, I suppose. One can argue with respect to our enemies, we wouldn't want them to know. But the government should be willing to tell you what they're doing. And all you have to do is test your own heart. If you're doing something for somebody else, not for you, not for anyone else, but for them, what sort of a problem do you have telling them what you're doing?
Representative Brogdon.
I think at this point I could just say ditto, I suppose, and go on to the next question. And, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the election is the ultimate means of accountability. It is the ultimate mechanism by which you hold the elected officials who are your government, make up your government, accountable. And when the election rolls around, that's when you have an opportunity to decide whether or not you want to reinvest that authority in that individual steward. Of course, you have the federal, state, county, and municipal levels of governance, as well as the school board. So there's several levels of governance that are serving you, and it does take take an effort, as Ken Sellers mentioned earlier, to be informed enough and aware enough so you can make a good informed decision. But the accountability is absolutely complete accountability based on the election.
Thank you. We're going to start the third question with Gary. Do we have the right under the Constitution to recall federal judges, including Supreme Court judges, when they do not follow the Constitution?
I think we do. The 14th Amendment, if you read, it's not necessarily broken into section, but if you read the third little paragraph there, it says, and in context, it appears to say that no one may hold any sort of office, civil or military, who has previously taken an oath to support the Constitution, which has engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same. So to me, I interpret that to say if they took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution and then have rebelled or insurrected against the Constitution, then it says, but Congress may by a 2/3 vote of each House remove such disability, and I would consider that a disability. And I believe that enables us to, or our representatives by proxy, to remove federal judges.
Yes, the Constitution does provide for it, and it's Congress, our representatives, that carry it out. And one would presume that if we don't like the judges, we'll be telling the representatives follow our will, or at least pursue the issues. Now, a little bit of research, and I'll end it. In 1803, U.S. District Judge John Pickering was impeached and convicted. And Supreme Court, 1804, Supreme Court Associate Justice Samuel Chase was impeached and acquitted. And it was pretty common for judges to be held accountable in the political leanings that they had. For some reason, we got away from that. They became sacrosanct. I tend to think that the judges in the Congress are cut out of the same cloth. That's why they don't take them on. So again, it's back to the people.
I'm glad Senator Brogdon is referencing his Constitution, so I'll stall long enough for him to give you an authoritative answer. You know, if you look at this proactively instead of reactively, it is obvious through the concerns that many of us have had for several years about judicial activism, where the judges are become a legislature instead of fulfilling their delineated role. You know, I use the statement that we in this country don't submit at the point of a gun. We willingly choose to submit ourselves to the laws of the land by free choice. We take on the attitude of submission to the laws of the land, but we reserve for ourselves the right to elect and select those lawmakers. And that is why we're frustrated when we have judicial activism, because we do not feel we have any recourse. So I look at this proactively. You know, those that have appointing authority in the judiciary. So it's important even more so to recognize the powers that you're delegating to your elected officials, one of which is the ability to appoint the judiciary, those that have appointing authority. And then many of the judges have to be confirmed by the Senate, the body of the Senate, whether at the federal or the state level. So we confirm the state judges, and maybe you can address this.
Yes, and that's the neat thing about our Constitution. It's not real thick, and you can find stuff pretty quick. Article 3, Section 1 tells us how and when a judge can serve, and it's pretty simple. Only during good behavior. That's what the Constitution says. The very next article, Article 3, Section 2, gives Congress full impeachment power over those judges, whether they be federal, appellate, or even Supreme Court.
Okay, thank you. We'll start out with Ken on the fourth question. Should the federal government be allowed to own land?
Before I answer that, I just wanted to add that Congress has the ability to change the court system below the Supreme Court. So they could wipe the whole thing out tomorrow if they wanted to and start over. Back to the question.